Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're tackling something pretty heavy but absolutely crucial to understand: the historical and ideological foundations of fascism. It's one of the 20th century's most impactful and, honestly, most complex political movements. We'll be looking directly at the source material to dissect exactly how this ideology functioned, where it came from, and how it ultimately fractured into different devastating traditions.
It's a word we hear thrown around constantly today in our political discourse, usually just as a generic insult. But as focused learners, we really need to step back and ask, what exactly is fascism? If we strip away all the modern hyperbole, what are its actual historical components? Okay, let's dive into this by looking at its literal roots. The term actually comes from the Italian word fasces, which literally means a bundle of rods with an axe blade sticking out of it. Back in Imperial Rome, this signified the authority of magistrates. But it wasn't until Benito Mussolini used the term to describe his paramilitary armed squads during World War I that the word took on a clear ideological meaning. It became this powerful symbol of strength through unity. The idea is simple: a single rod can be snapped easily, but a bundled fascia? Unbreakable.
Now, historians often describe this ideology as a bit of an ill-assorted hodgepodge of ideas, so having a clear roadmap is going to help us deconstruct everything systematically. We're breaking this down into 5 parts. First, the origins of the movement. Second, its core themes. Third, the 2 distinct traditions it split into. Fourth, the concept of the totalitarian state. And finally, the intersection of fascism and racism.
All right, let's jump straight into part 1. The origins of fascism, and how it was essentially a massive revolt against modernity. Born purely out of the absolute trauma and devastation of World War I, fascism didn't just want to reform politics, it literally wanted to destroy conventional political thought. The Nazis in Germany actually proclaimed that 1789 is abolished, directly referencing the French Revolution. Fascism was a deliberate, total revolt against Enlightenment values. Out went liberty, equality, and fraternity, and in came order, authority, and unquestioning obedience. It was a fierce reaction to the perceived weakness of early democratic governments and the massive social disruptions caused by rapid industrialization. Moving on to our second section, let's zoom in on the structural core of the ideology, the idea of strength through unity. So generic fascism is notoriously shapeless, right? It's really tough to pin down in just a single sentence. But historians generally agree that it leans heavily on 5 distinct ideological pillars: anti-rationalism, struggle, leadership and elitism, a very specific interpretation of socialism, and ultranationalism. Let's look at that first pillar: anti-rationalism. Fascists completely despised the Enlightenment's focus on universal reason and abstract thinking. Instead, they revered action above all else. Mussolini loved slogans like "action, not talk" and "inactivity is death." They practiced the politics of the will, focusing entirely on sheer emotional appeal. The goal was to address the soul and the instincts, using heavy myth and propaganda to whip the masses into frantic activity, rather than encouraging any sort of reasoned debate. Next up is the theme of struggle, which draws heavily on social Darwinism. Basically, fascism took the concept of natural selection and applied it directly to human society. They firmly believed that human existence is just this unending competition. And uniquely among political ideologies, fascism actually viewed war as an absolute good. It actively demanded the elimination of anyone deemed weak or inadequate, claiming they literally had to be sacrificed for the common good so the strong could prosper. For our third theme, leadership and elitism, we see a total, radical rejection of human equality. Fascism is fundamentally elitist. You have philosophers like Friedrich Nietzsche with his concept of the Superman, who is totally unbound by conventional morality, heavily influencing fascist thought. Mussolini took that philosophical idea and turned it into a demand for absolute, charismatic political authority. In their worldview, the masses are inherently weak and desperately need a supreme leader who holds a monopoly on wisdom to guide them.
So, how did this charismatic leadership actually play out in reality? Well, we can see exactly how it materialized by looking at the timeline of the 1922 political crisis in Italy. On October 27th, fascist troops gather. The very next day, even though he had superior regular troops at his disposal, the king refuses to declare martial law and actually summons Mussolini. By October 29th, the so-called March on Rome proceeds, and Mussolini forms his cabinet.
Here's what's really fascinating about that event. The historical record shows the March on Rome wasn't an actual military seizure of power. The Italian state had the full ability to resist, but the establishment just completely lacked the political will to do so. But because fascism relies so heavily on emotion and myth-making, Mussolini's regime completely spun this. They rewrote history to portray it as this glorious, spontaneous uprising of strength that purged a weak parliamentary system, turning it into an incredibly powerful founding myth. Moving to our fourth theme, socialism. Now, we have to be really precise here, because you often hear the term National Socialism. Fascists absolutely despised large-scale capitalism, mainly because its materialism and pursuit of self-interest undermined national cohesion. However, they vehemently rejected Marxist class war. Their primary goal was always to destroy communism. They essentially used socialist or collectivist rhetoric to seduce the working class away from international solidarity, forcing them instead to unite entirely under the banner of the nation. And that brings us to the final core theme, ultra-nationalism, or more specifically, integral nationalism. This is an intense, almost hysterical enthusiasm where your individual identity gets completely absorbed by the national community. This promised a total rebirth of national pride, arising from the ashes, but it was something that could only be achieved through aggressive expansionism, strict militarism, and total economic autarky, which basically means achieving self-sufficiency through conquest. All right, let's pivot to Section 3, the two traditions. This is where we look at the major historical divergences of these ideas into statism versus racism. So generic fascism actually split into two very distinct and sometimes even rival traditions. This comparison is a massive aha moment. It clearly maps out the deep separation between the Italian model, which was based entirely on extreme statism, and the German Nazi model, which was deeply rooted in extreme racism. While they definitely overlap in those generic themes we just covered, their ultimate end goals were vastly different. To really clarify this divergence, Italian fascism literally worshipped the state. The state itself was the ultimate ethical goal, and it was theoretically voluntaristic, meaning anyone could technically submit to and join the state, regardless of their background. German Nazism, on the other hand, completely different. Hitler did not venerate the state itself. He viewed the state merely as a vessel or a biological instrument to advance what they considered the Aryan master race. It was entirely based on rigid biological determinism. Moving right along to Section 4, the totalitarian state, where the defining mantra was literally everything for the state. Okay, so Mussolini tried to structure the Italian economy using a concept called corporatism. He pitched this as a great third way between the free market and central planning. In theory, it was supposed to organically harmonize business and labor into a unified whole for the common good. But what's the real takeaway here? In reality, it was just an authoritarian mechanism for the state to completely smash independent worker organizations, eliminate all strikes, and exert direct political control over major industries. And that leads us to our fifth and final section, fascism and racism, and what we can only call the tragedy of biology. To truly grasp the horrific framework of the Nazi tradition, we have to look at how anti-Semitism evolved. Prejudice against Jewish people had existed for centuries, primarily as religious persecution. But in the 19th century, the growth of a pseudoscience of race completely warped this. It transformed historical anti-Semitism from a religious prejudice into a rigid, inescapable biological theory, asserting that human beings are fundamentally divided by unchangeable genetic traits. At the absolute dark core of the Nazi worldview was this completely false, baseless assertion that your genetic and physical characteristics, your race, directly produced all of your intellectual, moral, and social characteristics, your culture. This was the horrific claim that biological race definitively dictates human worth. It turned political racism into an absolute, inescapable death sentence for those they categorized as biologically inferior. So when you take that generic fascist theme of life as an unending struggle, where the weak must be eliminated for the strong to survive, and you merge it with this pseudo-scientific extreme racism, the result is catastrophic. This grim fusion is exactly what justified forced eugenics programs and ultimately the systematic extermination of European Jewry in the Holocaust. As we wrap up this explainer on an incredibly dense piece of historical analysis, we're really left grappling with a vital question. Psychologists like Erich Fromm have argued that fascism actually springs from a fear of freedom, meaning that during times of intense economic or political crisis, people will willingly surrender their liberty to an all-powerful leader in exchange for just a sense of security. If the seeds of this ideology thrive on insecurity and the breakdown of established norms, what does this history teach us today about the ever present vulnerabilities and honestly the profound fragility of our own modern democratic institutions? Thank you so much for learning with us today. Keep asking questions and keep exploring.